So, welcome again. Good evening. I now trust that through sharing my screen, you are able to see a slide that is rather colorful and where it says Data Career. Okay, then let's get started. Let's get started for real, so to speak. So welcome. This is, as you know, an event of the AI Guild. We'll also talk about that in a minute, what the AI Guild is for those of you who aren't yet a member. This is all new. We're going to talk about data careers today. We're specifically going to talk about first and second roles, and we're going to talk about it in a way by trying to share what we're observing in terms of the differentiation of roles and the emerging specialization, and also how the labor market is changing. And we hope this is useful. And then what you're getting tonight actually is all new. So we haven't done this before. We haven't done it like this. There's some background to it that I'll explain in a minute, but it's essentially new. So because it's essentially new, we would actually value your feedback. So if there's anything you'd like to point out tonight, please use the chat and tell us right away. We are going to use Eventbrite tomorrow to share the slides with you, and also, so to speak, a link where you can reach us if you have further comments or hints or tips or things that you see. Because principally speaking, we're doing this tonight and we're committed to doing this kind of event every month. And try and work out on improving the data careers for people that are early in the field. This is not necessary to say that we expect you to be junior in the sense of being 22 or junior in the sense of you just graduated or something like this. We just think that this is an event for people that are early in the field, wherever you come from. And one of the really distinctive features of this field at the moment is that people coming to it have such a great age range. So part of what I've done is earlier, Dânia as well. So we were part of a boot camp here in Berlin, and we had participants from 24 to 52 age range. And they were all early then in their data career. And this is actually amazing. And I think also welcome also the international spread of this. So it's for all those people, no matter where you're from and no matter how old you are and no matter which gender you are, we're going to try and work out how to improve data careers. Okay, I have to press another admit all and then show you the second slide. So this is the motto of what we're doing today. The guy I have this quote from is called Jean-François Garnier. He's a Canadian entrepreneur. He's one of the co-founders of a company called Element AI. I think he's really done his homework here, so to speak, in also trying to understand how data careers are going. So there's a slide behind that that I'm going to go to in a minute where he's been working on the talent pool. So if you read through this quote, I basically want to take your eyes to 4 years of experience or 5 years to lead an entire institute. The phrasing that Jean-François here uses is around AI and AI researchers, and it looks as if the quote has something to do with academia. But I think this is actually not what he means, or actually I know it's not what he means. He means the broader AI field, and what he's trying to say here is that because the field is young and because so many people are coming to it, and because also at the moment it's fluid, flexible, and progress is relatively fast, it only takes 4 years of experience if you keep at it and keep working at it to become somebody that is experienced, so senior, and perhaps only 5 years to be something like an expert. So to move relatively fast forward in your career. And the overall backdrop of this is work that he's done. This slide I'm showing you here is from 2018 because it's the best visual. He did it again in 2019. I haven't yet seen whether he's been able to do it again for 2020 and has results. But what he's been trying to do, he's been trying to find out how many people are there in the world that credibly can claim to be practitioners. It's called Global AI Talent Pool Heat Map. But if you look on the left side, he in this instance used LinkedIn, and he used conference venues to try and come up with an estimate of how many people there are actually doing this. And I think he wasn't looking at talent in the sense of trying to find people that potentially could do it. He was actually looking at people that are already doing it and therefore constitute the talent pool of expertise. And if you look at the numbers, it's a small number. Now, he might have missed people, and in some countries, for example, LinkedIn doesn't really work very well, and so on and so on. But even if he's off and it's not 30,000 people, but it's 50,000 people, to my mind, at least, this is a very small number. It also explains a number of things. It explains the size of the opportunity because the field will have to grow very rapidly. It also explains why many practitioners are struggling a bit to find their role, and why companies often are in early stages and stuck with their proof of concepts and perhaps not yet putting too much into production, because it's simply early days. There are not many people that can do this. And part of this research was, I remember this well, then a longer article in the New York Times in around summer of 2018, where they tried to get at how many people in the world actually can be called experts in this field. So experts in the sense of really being leading something. And they concluded back then that the number was really definitely smaller than 10,000 people. No way you looked at it. And that's a very, very small number overall. Okay, on to the next slide. The AI Guild. So both Dânia and I, and we also noticed among the participants, a fair number are part of this community. We tend to think of it as the go-to community for practitioners accelerating AI adoption. You can find more about the Guild on the web, and part of what we're doing today is based on our work there. So I already introduced Dânia to you, and I would like to go back to Dânia for her to introduce herself. Dânia?
Yes, thank you, Chris. So yes, I am a founding member of the AI Guild. As Chris just mentioned, we are a community for AI practitioners. Myself, I am a data scientist, and I work basically with machine learning models focused on predictive analytics. Currently, I am working on e-commerce and doing order predictions. And before, I was also teaching at a bootcamp, and I am in the data career or in the data field since 2012. So originally I come from Brazil. I studied applied math. I did a master's in computer science and landed my first job in analytics back in Brazil. And then in 2015, I moved here to Berlin and started working here in startups and now in a SME. And of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't know if there is a link here on the presentation.
There is a link on the slide. I hope it works.
So when we share the slides, if you are not already a connection with me, please do send me an invitation.
Thank you, Dânia. So actually, for tonight, in a way, Dânia is our expert in more than one way, not only because she's been in the field so long, but also because as we go through the presentation, you will see that we have 3 sections. I'll explain that in a minute. And the first section is actually going to be led by Dânia. And the second section, she's also actually the key expert. Dânia, thank you very much. We're going to benefit from your expertise tonight in multiple ways. Your machine learning expertise and your expertise with the careers and the teaching. I'm
happy to share here.
Yes, thank you. Okay, on to myself. So like Dânia, I'm part of this AI Guild crew. I also run a campaign that some of you perhaps know for the 10,000 data scientists for Europe. So this is also based on the need for more talent to be found and come forward. I also worked for a bootcamp, and I've done data career coaching in various ways for a number of years now, mainly pro bono, because I think it's a really interesting and important challenge to get this working. Okay, this is what we're going to do tonight, and we're going to ask you to help us a little bit, and I'm going to do this right now by sending you a poll. If I did everything correctly, the poll is entirely anonymous. So we're just going to ask you 3 quick questions and want 3 quick answers. We will share the results with everybody, but it's a first. So of course you've signed up, and yes, we can look at who signed up and look at some email addresses, but we would like to have a better sense, and I hope this helps. So let me launch that, and you will see this in a minute. And then I'm going to ask you to fill it in while, if you can and want to, while I look at the outline for you tonight. Oh, I need to move this around, apologies. So we're doing this is a data career workshop. And number one, what we want to do is we want to look with you and for you, and also with feedback from you at data roles specialization. What we mean by that in the first instance is that we're observing that things are getting more specific, and we're going to look today particularly at data analytics versus data engineering versus data science, but also machine learning engineer. While we're getting ready for this, we were also thinking, well, you could take computer vision aside, or you could take NLP aside, and there is something about specialization, and we want to get working on this, and also working on this with you, because we think it's important, and it's changing the field, and it's changing the field also perhaps already in a second sense, that we will still have to explore, in the sense that at the moment we're talking about specialization in terms of technical roles, and in the next step we could also perhaps consider that domain expertise is becoming increasingly more relevant. So whether you have a background in health, or background in mobility, or in finance, or some such thing. I have one question coming in with the first and second roles. I will do that in a minute for you. The second one is, we are then going to do pragmatically, after discussing the differentiation of the roles, pragmatically start looking with you as what does that mean, and how might you go about upgrading your competence profile if you were interested in that type of specialization. So the second part is then fairly pragmatic, and in the third part we're going to then try and talk more generally about career advancement and what to pay attention to in terms of upgrading your competence profile, and perhaps also in making choices in when and where to specialize, if you so like. Okay, first and second role. With first and second role, we mean first role, we typically mean your first job, and second role, your second job. We've called it role because it could also be that you have different roles in the same company. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change company in terms of like changing jobs, but like first role and second role. So maybe entry role and second role, first role and second role. So the first kind of things you do. It could also be, I mean, I know this kind of specialization could also happen until your third role. I mean, it's not, we used first and second role because we figured that maybe a lot of people out there looking at the event description would then be able to figure out quickly whether we meant them or not. Yeah, whether you're a target audience or not. Let us know if this actually doesn't work.
Chris, if it's
Yes.
okay, I will take the second question
Yes.
from Lindsay. So thank you for writing there. I will define what are the differences between each of the roles. So this is the first part of the presentation, the hashtag data role specialization. And then we're going to discuss what are different skills and different tasks for each of the roles. So I hope it will become clearer after this part of the presentation.
Okay, great. So I'm going to end the poll, and here you go. This is what we have. So in the first instance, we were asking whether you were in Germany, Europe, or the world. We're doing this because, or I included this question because I realized, well, this is an all online event, so we actually have no idea where you are. So let's ask. Okay, so most of you, the overwhelming majority is in Germany. Not unsurprising because the AI Guild got started in Berlin, but there's also 4 of you that are outside the EU somewhere. So a special welcome. I think, and it'd be interesting to see how this applies in other parts. And that said, the AI Guild is very international. So we have members everywhere from New Zealand to Mexico and back again. Then the majority actually is looking for first role, but second role also. And then the other I included, so it's not a first or a second role, but okay, see. Somebody can't see the poll results. Can you see them now? Okay, so, okay, super. Okay, so first one was where you are currently, Germany, EU, world. You can see the second one, what are you looking for, a first or second role? So it seems to be that the majority are at this point where they're actually trying to find their first role. Also some in their second role and some are beyond that. And then very many said that the third one was a multiple choice one. So very many said data scientist. So that's the 20 out of 28, but there were also interest particularly in data analyst. And then the other ones also get a fair mention. Data engineering, perhaps least. Okay. Okay, everybody's seen them? then I would stop the sharing and close this. And move on to the next slide. Just a couple more background slides before we get into the first section. So just for your information, what we're sharing today is based on some prior work inside the AI Guild. So career coaching that's been running for juniors and seniors. It runs monthly. It runs monthly in the junior and the senior track, so to speak, for about 10 participants each. So we have a certain kind of yearly capacity in terms of slots where we can help. The coaching inside the AI Guild is free. So it's run pro bono. And then there are a couple of pointers that we've taken from doing this for a while now. So one of the things that we've learned is that the search for a first or second role can actually take a while, more than 6 months. We've also learned that upgrading inside a company may be easier. So this is, you know, if your first role is in a company, maybe your second and slightly different or advanced role is also in the same company. That job advertisements don't always help because they're a bit confusing or not specific enough, or search for the unicorn. And we've also learned that people that then have their first or second role sometimes come back and are not that satisfied in real life because it doesn't really meet, there's a mismatch in terms of expectations, which then requires a good look at. Okay, this goes back to the very beginning. So why are we doing this? What are we seeing? We're seeing this specialization and differentiation that we're going to be specifically talking about today. The rising value of the domain expertise we see in the background. So we've noticed that people that come out of finance, upgrade to a data career, perhaps go back to finance. We also think we have noticed in industry that this experimental phase where people are doing proofs of concepts or so is coming to an end in a way, and that there is now an increasing focus on deployment. So actually making it work and making it impact the business in terms of finding new users, having a new product, improving the bottom line, something like this. Okay. Why do people find a mismatch between expectations and real life? Dânia, do you want to have a look at this question?
Yes,
from Jamie?
I need to unmute first.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we need, especially for the job descriptions that are looking for a unicorn, there are a lot of skills or a lot of experience, a lot of tasks in the description. And in the end, you end up doing just a small subset of them. And sometimes it could be that you are doing even other things that are not in the description, very much related to data cleaning and data pipeline when the company hasn't had that before. So from my experience, yes, I have worked in data teams with support of engineers, which help a lot in building this part, but especially in the beginning, and I still see that happening until now, a lot of the companies, they don't have established process for getting their data. And even when they do, you as a data scientist, or when you're doing your machine learning experimentation, you figure out that you need more features or you need to collect more data. And for that part, then if it's not in the job description, there is this mismatch of expectations.
Thank you, Dânia. I have a quip from a friend. So I got hired to be a machine learning engineer, and all I do is write SQL queries. Yeah. Yeah,
it depends on what you understand as data engineering and what the company understands as data engineering. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So this is what we meant with mismatch of expectations. And sometimes it's actually the job descriptions and even the interview process is part of the problem, because there's a suggestion that you'd be doing certain things that actually don't then materialize because the company happens not to be ready for it. So they overestimated the capacity.
Yeah, and a lot of the times also they don't know.
Yes.
You figure out as you go. When you're doing the daily work, then you start figuring out things.
Yes. So perhaps on to one more slide. I mean, the reason why we're all meeting online today, or rather the AI Guild career coaching used to happen mainly in Berlin, in person. Then we were thinking about taking this to other cities. Then Corona happened, and here we are now today online. Also, it kind of changes the format here a bit. So I appreciate very much that we're a bit more in a broadcasting mode rather than an interaction or coaching mode. However, if you're not a member of the guild, you can join the guild and then benefit from the smaller format with 10 people that is coaching inside. So our current situation. So many of you are looking for a first role. I saw that. And that means you're actively looking right now. And then you've probably noticed that the labor market is difficult, has to some extent actually frozen. It's also frozen in Germany. So there's data suggesting that hiring generally is down by about 2/3. So this is a lot. On the other hand, there's also some evidence or anecdotal evidence in our network that for data roles, people actually still get hired. So it hasn't stopped frozen completely. So it may be difficult throughout the year, but I wanted to, in designing this slide, I then chose to focus on the other side of it. So there's also a lot of, at the moment, only anecdotal evidence, and then also some numbers, like about this Zoom app that we're using at the moment, being the fastest growing app of all times. There is some evidence that things are changing in the sense of favoring even more a move, so to speak, a wholesale shift to the digital world, which means there will be more data-driven companies and more data available and more opportunity to do things with data and more meaningful data, because also more of our behavior then is online and so on. So in thinking about it, I think that, so a friend of mine said, this is accelerating. I'm not yet sure whether this is accelerating digital by 3 years or by 10 years, but it's going to accelerate a lot. And it may do a similar trick for data and also for data careers at the end. So I am actually expecting that once this has gone on for a while and companies are in a position to hire again, that there will be an even greater demand for data talent than there is now. So I'm expecting this to get better. Okay, over to Dânia for the first part on the data role specialization. We are in this situation where I have the Zoom controls, and I think you can probably not say press next slide, can you? No, then you just say next slide and I'll press. And then for next time round, we'll see if we can somehow share these controls, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Okay, yeah, we can do it like that. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so let's dive into that. Can you please go to the next slide? Yes. So here there is, on the left side, we have the productionizing machine learning. I adapted from this paper that was published by Google. And basically we have there all the pieces that are part of an end-to-end machine learning solution. So you can see there, it's kind of the big picture. We have a lot of different blocks and they all are part of one solution. Even though it's only one solution, we have different roles or different people involved in building this solution. And this is what you see on the right side, so on data roles. So we start with the blue one, data engineer. Here I put data engineer as responsible for data collection, data quality, and data pre-processing. So basically building the data pipeline. After that, we have the gray one, which is the machine learning engineer. Here, machine learning engineer is taking care of the overall infrastructure. And this is what you see on the bottom there. Also taking care about the configuration, the resource management of the machines, monitoring all the systems and all the management tools, or process management tools that are needed. And this is for the entire process. So it starts also supporting the data engineer and all the data pipeline, but supports all the other roles coming next. The next one is the data analyst, the yellow one. So makes sense, yeah, it's responsible for the analysis, also for understanding or bringing the business logic. Can you go back?
Yes, I apologize.
No problem. Yeah, so the business logic, not that the data analyst is responsible for defining it, but responsible taking care of the translation and bringing this to the solution, integrating the business logic into the solution. And after the deployment of the model, most of the time, it's also the data analyst that is responsible for the A/B testing and reporting most of the times. The data scientist, which most of you answered here as the interest, is taking care about the feature extraction, the parameter configuration of the machine learning models, and also the offline validation, or let's say the technical testing before it gets deployed. And finally, the AI researcher is responsible for the main block, the machine learning model block. And in this part, we can say that the researcher is responsible, or the way I see it is that the AI researcher is being responsible for creating a new model. So that is the research part really, and investigating new models and trying to push the limits of the state-of-the-art solutions. So approaching a new problem or figuring out a new solution could be from the technical or the theoretical point of view, or from the implementation point of view, that is developing some kind of new package. But the data scientist is the one that is responsible for integrating or making use of this newly or existent machine learning model, that is training and validating this model according to the data existent in business. So it depends on what is it about the machine learning model that we are talking about. The development of a new machine learning model is the AI researcher, as it is there. But for using the model that is training and validating the model in this end-to-end solution, then it's the data scientist. Okay,
thank you, Dânia. You have two questions. The first one is the machine learning engineer also responsible for ops, so for ML ops?
Yes, this is what I mean by infrastructure, configuration, and resource management. This would be all part of data ops or machine learning ops.
Yes, and actually I asked you specifically when we were constructing this slide whether in the data roles we should also have a data ops role now, because if we're thinking about software, we have the DevOps, and indeed productionizing and making sure that this works. This is an interesting part. At the moment, I think you then chose not to have it as a specific data role. The machine learning engineer covers this, but I think
it's pretty flexible.
It's pretty flexible, and it could also emerge actually as a specialization. That you will have an ML engineer that's more responsible, so to speak, for the process management and the infrastructure, and then there's somebody who's specifically for the deployment.
Yes.
Yeah, could very well be. Okay.
Yes, again, could be the part of the data engineer specialization also.
Yeah.
So I think it's very possible.
The other question was, is there any development or research expected from an ML engineer? I think you indirectly answered that through the ML models and the AI researcher. Is more to say on this?
Well, I think that this is also something that we see in the market, that there are different titles for same kind of tasks or roles in the end. So okay. Yeah, it could be that in some companies, especially the big companies, I don't know, like Google, you could have the title of machine learning engineer for people that are actually doing research or that are working on the state of the art and pushing that forward. That could be the case.
Okay. Third question that came in, isn't feature extraction or parameter configuration also part of developing new machine learning algorithms?
Okay, so the way I understand this, because this part of productionizing machine learning is to build the end-to-end solution or a machine learning product for a business. And the way I understand is that developing new machine learning algorithms, when you are an AI researcher or when you are conducting research, yes, it could be that because of that you are developing, it could be that your research is really about a model that does feature extraction. Or it could be that the research itself is about a better way to do feature extraction or feature extraction for a specific domain. Or even the parameter configuration, yes, that could be part of the research.
Okay, well, while you're answering questions, there are more coming in.
Sure, that's why we're here for.
Yes, that's why we're here. So the data analyst, research new information from the data. So I take this to mean that find valuable information in the data, which is true, right?
Yes, this is what I mean, or this is what is there inside the analysis box. So digging in the data, doing some kind of discovery based on data. Like data mining things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's also interesting here, for example, to note that you've included among the data roles, the data analyst in productionizing machine learning. So there is also a data analyst role in machine learning and not just in reporting.
Yes, I believe so. When you have to build this final solution, you have to understand the business logic, or even before you dive in the data to do some feature extraction and train some model, you first do some EDA, some exploration analysis to understand what is it that you're working with, especially when you're new to the domain and you first have to understand what is it that you're working with. Just going blindly and like testing all the features or testing all the models to find out which one has a better accuracy. Yes, it's also possible to do, but I think it's smarter when you first understand what you're doing, or at least you have some better idea where you're stepping into.
Okay, great. Should I move to the next slide?
Yes.
Here we go. A bit
So
more detail.
Yeah, here I try to put a bit more into details. What are the tasks and skills so that we can see in practice what is the difference between each of the roles. So we start here with the data analyst, because I think this is where the work starts, let's say. So we have here a task of business and data understanding to report on what happens, so what happened in the past and what is happening now. And the skills are mostly descriptive analytics, SQL, statistics, and dashboarding and visualization tools. Most of the times also when you have to build a report, or at least you have to tell a story based on the data, what you discovered from this data. Next up, we have the data scientist. So the task here is mainly to understand the business case and to be able to build future features based on the data existent, to train predictive models or classification models and models that are relevant or that can address such use cases from business. The main skills are statistics, again, SQL, programming, for example, Python or R, and of course, the machine learning and deep learning techniques. The data engineer task is to build and maintain the infrastructure and the pipeline to collect, clean, and pre-process the data. So first you have the data engineer taking care of the data collection step, and in a way that it's consistent and reliable so that both the data analysts and data scientists can run their own tasks. And the data engineer skills are more engineering skills, so about distributed systems, databases, and overall software engineering best practices. This is very or close related to the machine learning engineer. The tasks specifically, or sorry, the skills specifically are mostly the same. So again, software engineering. Here I wrote the DevOps skills and about the systems architecture also. But the tasks are more about optimizing and deploying the machine learning models in production. So after the work of the data scientists or working closely with the data scientists. And a bit more separated from all of them is the AI researcher, because here the task again is about building new machine learning models, new machine learning algorithms, and finding new solutions or custom scientific solutions. And then the skills are more related to research and presenting at conferences, writing publications. So in order to make all of this a bit more digestible, can you move to the next slide, please?
Yes, here you go.
Yes, I have here a parallel between data science and cooking. So I try to bring this technical tasks or technical work into something that is more present in our daily life. So we can think about, for example, I will start with the machine learning engineer, which is the gray one. So we have here, for example, the infrastructure. That would be all the kitchen space you have and the available appliances you have for cooking. And then you need some of the ingredients to cook. So then we go to the blue tasks, which are the data engineering tasks. So data collection is like sewing, data quality is harvesting, and data pre-processing is to prepare the ingredients. So now that you have the ingredients, you can you have to choose which are the which is the recipe that you're going to cook. And this is represented by the yellow box of analysis. Once you choose which is the recipe, you start to use your utensils to cook. So this is the feature extraction box, which is the data scientist task. And choosing the parameters is trying combinations of appliances and recipes. So this is also part of the data scientist task. The last data scientist task is the offline validation, which would be tasting in the kitchen. So when you're preparing, you just take a little bit and see if it's too salty, too sweet, or if it's spicy enough. After this, you have the deployment and monitoring, which is again from the machine learning engineer in gray. And after you deploy this, you have the A/B testing, which is in yellow, and this is part of the customer's tasting. So this is after you finish cooking and you go put your dish or your meal in front of the people that will taste and tell you if it's good or not. There's also more throughout explanation or comparison between data science and all of the steps in the link that I put there. Yes. And can you please go to the next one, please? Yes, so the data roles in this comparison of cooking would be something like the data engineer is the one processing all the ingredients at scale. The machine learning engineer is turning one recipe that you can cook once into many dishes that can be served efficiently. So imagine that you have a restaurant, maybe it's a small one, and you can cook by yourself. But if you start to grow and you have hundreds of people going there for the meal, you have to be able to serve them efficiently. And this is the role of the machine learning engineer. For the data analyst, it would be to check the quality of your ingredients and your recipes to make sure that there is a connection between them and also that the recipes are the ones that your customers want to order. For the data scientist, it's about creating and using the recipes to cook. And the AI researcher is the one building the kitchen appliances. So you can think about a microwave or a freezer, anything that you need to use in the kitchen, then the AI researcher would build so that the data scientist can use as soon as the ingredients are available. So for example, if you need a blender, then the AI researcher is the one building this blender. So they are creating, let's say, a new algorithm, or they have a new package that is implemented, and now the data scientists can just in Python import this package and use it.
Okay, thank you, Dânia. You have a question. Interesting question, actually. So is data analyst plus data engineer just the old BI?
Okay, so as from what I understand, the business intelligence would be, yes, the people that bring together the business understanding and the data understanding and build reports. In that sense, it's very similar to data analyst. I don't know data engineer, because in the case that you're thinking about the traditional databases structure of data, then yes, that could also be part of the data engineer. But I would think that this is similar to what you mentioned, Chris, about your friend that was hired to be a data engineer and just write SQL queries. So I would say that the old business intelligence analyst was doing most SQL queries to get the data from one place to the other.
Yes, so business intelligence is not typically part of machine learning, or machine learning and business intelligence are not the same thing.
Maybe in the beginning it was.
Yeah, but it's
so
not.
For example, my first role in 2012 was marketing intelligence analyst.
Okay.
Because I was
yes.
working in marketing. And what I was doing is this: I was taking data with SQL queries from traditional databases and building machine learning models. So okay. Yeah, I think as the field evolves, then the naming, or as also what we are seeing now that it's still evolving, we are getting more specialized roles and job titles.
Understood. Anybody more questions? If so, please type them in. Also, if you would like to take the microphone for a sec, you can unmute yourself and say something. We've come through this section, so thank you, Dânia. So if you have more questions and either want to type or would like to share something, there's a good moment, and I can give you 30 seconds to make up your mind.
Yes, and I would really appreciate if someone else wants to speak or wants to turn on their camera so we're not feeling so lonely.
I'd like to ask a question, please, Chris. Hi.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi. How are you doing?
Hi.
Hi. Thanks. It's really interesting so far. Yeah, I just had a question about data engineer and machine learning engineer. This is something which I work at one of the boot camps, and I'm actually a career and development coach there. And yeah, I've been looking at this in the marketplace, and it seems to me that quite a lot of people blend this into one role. And I'm just interested to see the fact that tonight you split it out. So for example, like on HackerRank, they talk about data engineer, data analyst, and data scientist, and they've come up with criteria for each of these three roles. So I guess this was, I'm left with a puzzle slightly. You know, how is this something that's new, do you think? Or do you think it's just that certain sectors within the marketplace are still putting these as one role? Yes. I'm just curious, yeah, if you could just expand on that, that would help with the understanding, I think.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think that you are right to say that it depends. Some industries are still understanding what are the differences, or if there is any difference. And in the beginning, there was no data engineer, for example. So everyone was data scientist. And as I already shared in the beginning, also from my own experience, what you see is that, well, you have some engineers building the main application. And yes, of course, for the main application, there is some database, or there are some events coming from the app or from the website. And then they hire a data engineer to dig in this data and build a model. And then there is the realization that, well, you need to be able to process this data in a more frequent way. So ideally, maybe you want to do it real time, or maybe you want to do it once a day, but it needs to be a reliable process. And for that, you need some software engineering best practices. So from my experience, a lot of the engineers working in the main application, they started helping me to build this data pipeline. And then one of them got a role as a data engineer, because also then they realized that, well, this is a full-time job. So I think this is something that each industry or each company is figuring out as they go. And as for the difference between the data engineer and the machine learning engineer, I put there the split because in some cases you have the same team or the same people doing both roles, but I still see them as two different roles. So the data engineer is more about the input of the machine learning models, or the input from what the data analyst and the data scientists are going to work on. And the machine learning engineer is someone that is taking care of the output, or the after. So after there is a model and there was some validation, and you want to deploy that, or you want to integrate that into the product that you have, into the application that you have, then you need another interface. And this is when the machine learning engineer will help to serve this. Let's say if you have a model that does predictions, so you have to make sure that you will have fresh predictions and that they will be served, they will be available for the application to use. That's why I split into two roles.
Yeah, thank you, Dânia, and thank you also for the question, Lindsay. Also, actually, as an addendum, so to speak, also if you for the participants, and if you're looking for a first or second role, right? We spoke at the beginning about job advertisements, and there was this question, you know, what do we mean by? So they're sometimes confusing. So let's assume you're in a position where you have a job advertisement, perhaps you want to phone the company, or you have a job advertisement and you applied anyway and you go for the interview. Then what we're trying to do here is we're also trying to help you to manage the interview, and also actually to manage expectations. Yeah. So to some extent, we'd be even happy if you took this slide set and said to them, well, I've looked at your job description. So what's your priority? Do you really need a data engineer, or do you need a data scientist? Do you need a machine learning engineer, or are you looking for somebody to develop new models or something like this? Yeah, more in the realm of research. And this could help with HR and also the hiring manager precisely to clear up what they're really looking for, perhaps where their pain point is and where their expectations are, and what in your day-to-day work will be your priority. And to find that out is really valuable and important for you. And and this may then actually include the answer that they say, we don't know, or all of it. And then, of course, I don't know how Dânia sees this, but to me, this is a red flag. So there's an issue there. So all of it may mean that they're very early or they have a very small team, to which my rejoinder is then for a first or second role these days, this is not really that great, because you should go and find a team that's at least 4 or 5 people and includes 1 or 2 seniors to help you grow. Otherwise, why do it? Yeah, if you're on your own. And the other thing is, if they don't know, then, well, they don't know. And then the question is back to square one to some extent. So I also have I actually have the hope that in a very pragmatic sense, for all of the participants tonight and anybody else in this situation, this is a helpful tool to structure your approach to companies.
Yes, and I think it's also important that you have the understanding of the roles. At least I don't know about the titles, okay? So sometimes you will see a different title that is doing more of those roles, or especially, Chris, can you go back, I think, 2 slides when we have the skills and the tasks?
This one?
Yes, this one. So I try to really split them into 5 different, here in this case, 5 different roles. But yes, it's not uncommon to find data scientists that are doing data analyst tasks, or data engineers that have data scientist skills. So this is still a mix. And I try to, let's say, put there the pure tasks and skills, but there is some interchange in that. And I think that seeing things like this, let's say like black and white, which is not what happens in real life, things get more blurry. But I think this kind of separation helps, at least so you can understand what are your skills. You can assess which are the tasks you would like to take on and which are the skills you have, so you can focus more on this kind of task, but still be flexible to learn and do other tasks.
Okay.
This,
thank you.
Maybe this is going to be part of the next part.
Well, we have 2 more questions that I would invite you to answer before perhaps moving on to the next section. So the data interpreter is a question from Farid. So he was at a Gartner summit, at the Gartner summit, and somebody was introducing the notion of the data interpreter. Actually, a question back. Farid, what was your understanding of the data, of what the data interpreter is? Could you share in the chat? That'd be interesting, or take the microphone. Dânia, yes.
I think he's writing there that it's bridging between data scientists and business.
Yes, but what does that mean? In what sense, bridge?
Yeah, I don't know about this data interpreter role. I haven't seen it. I have heard about this, how do you call it? Data translators or business translators. And yes, maybe it's similar to that.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is, of course, there's a way in which if you're in the business intelligence / data analyst department, where the company has data and it's trying to gather intelligence from it in the sense of reporting or in the sense of visualization, then there could be a way, of course, in which precisely in these reporting and visualization functions, you need somebody who is an interpreter, who is then able to play it back to the business side so that they understand it, and perhaps also go back to the people doing the analysis and so on. However, if you're thinking about machine learning, then you're not writing a report for a human to make a decision, but there's a machine where you have an algorithm and the machine actually makes the decision in this sense, right?
Yes.
So then,
I think
the data interpreter is just somebody who explains how machine learning works, because the machine does the interpreting at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, or also because a lot of the things that a data scientist can do, I mean, training predictive or classification models, a lot of the times also have to do with the internal processes of the company and about automating or making it lighter on the decision-making process. Okay. And in that sense, you have to understand how the decision-making process works in order to build the best or the most suitable solution using machine learning, or sometimes not. So I think that's the first step. Understanding what is the process, what are the points where you can have automation, or where are the decision points, and how this decision is being made, how it's going to affect the next step or the overall process. And for that, you need business understanding, or you could have the translators or interpreters. So to understand, for example, we have data, we collect data that supports this decision, or we don't have data that supports this decision. When you have data that supports the decision, then you can try to understand if that data is enough to build a predictive model and things like that. And for that, it's part of my title is data scientist, and it's part of my job to do that. So I work a lot with the stakeholders to understand what is their process and where is it that we can use machine learning in the end. Because it's not just because you have data and you have data scientists that you can automate everything, or that the machine learning models are going to do everything for you. So could be also that this is the data interpreter role, I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you. One more question popped up, but the one before is the difference between machine learning engineer and software engineer. Oh, well, so Farid actually says thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Farid.
Yeah, thank you. Next for question also.
ML engineer versus software engineer.
Okay, so the way I understand it is that a software engineer can work in any of the engineering fields or in any kind of software, and the machine learning engineer would work more with applications involving machine learning or AI applications. But to be honest, I don't know that much about software engineering.
And I think there's actually also sometimes an issue buried there. So you may have a company that has, I don't know, 2 data scientists and a data engineer, but not actually a machine learning engineer. And then you have a model and you want to put it into production, and then you go to your software engineers.
Yes.
And very often the problems start then. Yeah?
Yes.
They start in the sense because different worlds, expectations, getting some clarity around it, possibly also different languages in terms of programming languages, and so on and so on. So I've seen and heard stories around issues around that. And one of the reasons also why we're doing this and presenting these data roles, to some extent, actually, I suppose we're also advocating for them. And what we want to say is that if you, in your company, you want to have an operation that is smooth, you will need for your deployment a machine learning engineer rather than just taking any old software engineer that may have not worked with machine learning before. Yeah. So there's also a need for this role to emerge and more teams to have 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 dedicated people to make sure that this stuff goes into production and isn't just a nice proof of concept or some toy to play with.
Yeah, because there are some things that are specific to machine learning solutions that might not be present in other like traditional software engineer solutions.
Yes. Okay, one more. In some job descriptions appears analytics or digital analytics. Where do these fit in data roles? Hard one, because it depends on the example, I suppose.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's something related to data analyst. So digital analytics or analytics in general could be more related to the business and doing reports and more kind of data mining. But yeah, it really depends on the job description.
So something that comes to my mind, so the concept of digital analytics actually reminds me of something I did, but like 10 years ago. And as we all know, the World Wide Web emerged some 30 years ago, and then more and more things happened online. And actually we started doing more and more things online and thereby also behaving online. And the first way this got interesting many, many years ago was that you could do log file analysis, right? You have servers where you have weblogs, and on these weblogs is, so to speak, inscribed what people were doing online when using a server. And you can analyze these, right? And I was thinking that when I look at the term digital analytics, in my mind, what happens in terms of what do I think this might be? I think this relates to how people actually behave online. That, to my mind, would be digital analytics. It can be, and then it can be very mundane things. So and actually also close to, for example, user experience stuff and improving a product. So imagine you are an e-commerce platform that has a shopping experience online, and then you want to find out what people are doing. So you want to, of course, know how many people there are and how long they're on your website and a few other things, but you also want to know how they behave on your website. So what do they click on first? What do they click on second? What do they never click on? What do they almost click on but actually don't? And so on and so on. So how they behave online. This is, when I see digital analytics, what I imagine. But Mariella, maybe you have a better notion or a different understanding of what's going on there. That's what I see.
Hi, hello
Hi.
everyone. Hi. I'm from now I am talking from Spain,
yes,
Barcelona.
Okay.
The thing is that my question is because I was working in internet companies in a business intelligence role, but in general I had a lot of tasks related to Google Analytics, now Facebook Insights, all the information about this is stored in the website, as you said. No weblogs specifically, is especially Google Analytics or platforms like that. And this kind of tools, Adobe Analytics as well, brings a lot of behavioral data. And finally, in these roles that you mentioned, is basic the input, no? As I understood. It's more that the type of data, the business domain that we are working on. No? This is the things that you try. Because really, for me, it's very difficult. There are a lot of data roles. I don't know in Germany, but in Spain, different data insights, digital analytics, data analytics, machine learning, and finally, all is about data. No, only talking this, and really. More or less, this is my point, how to fit these roles that in an internet company especially are important as well. But basically, as you said, I think it's data analysis in this case, even if it's behavioral data.
Actually, I can go back to one of my favorite examples to think about this a minute further. And I think it precisely exists in two senses. So there's a way in which this digital analytics exists in the realm of reporting and perhaps closer to marketing or business intelligence or something like this. You know, so you confirm that, you know, it's also about behavioral data, and then Google Analytics or Facebook or so on. And we're talking here about also very much talking about marketing channels. But on the other hand, actually, if you think about your shopping experience again on some online platform that has a recommender system, right? Then the recommender system also includes digital analytics, because it includes the behavior of the people on the shopping platform. And then if you get served, you may also like, or people also bought, and so on and so on. This is also exactly behavioral data. That is being used to feed the recommender system. So to some extent, digital analytics can actually be, again, something that is machine learning, is part of machine learning and part of, for example, of a recommender system. It would also have a role, for example, in autonomous driving. There, a prevalent thing that comes to my mind is actually the so-called edge cases. This can then this is about behavior actually that can be digital, or that is now simulated in digital realms, but is also, so to speak, on the street, so non-digital in real life, if you so like. And then there's a component of this digital analytics or the behavioral stuff that is used probably in marketing, that is used in reporting, that is used to inform certain kinds of business decisions without being part of any end-to-end machine learning solution. Dânia?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. You know. And from what I understood, Mariella, you were saying that most of the times the digital analytics is really about understanding the user behavior. So that also links to maybe building a recommendation system, but could be part of something that is not related to an end-to-end solution of machine learning.
Okay, then perhaps let's take the opportunity to leave this section behind and go here. So upgrading your competence profile. We already touched a bit, or I touched on this a bit when I said actually one of the things that you can do is take Dânia's elaboration of the roles here and help them use them to help you in your job search, and use them to talk to HR when trying to understand, for example, job advertisements, or actually use them in an interview to get at what you're going to be doing and whether this is what you want to do. And then this part of this that we're going to look at now also very much has to do with this role search or job search. Can be your first role, can be inside your company, can be for a new company in various kinds of ways. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to invite you to think about your CV, about your online profiles, perhaps your LinkedIn, your GitHub, GitLab, whatever you have in a particular kind of way, and work on upgrading them to get you to the point where you find a first or second role faster, and perhaps also you find a better one, and so on. So this section that we're now looking at is very much intended to serve you and to help you have a better experience and get what you want. Okay, and to start out, the first thing I would like you to do is, we've already spoken about startups and digital and so on. You know the notion of the user and the customer, and the user experience and the customer experience and so on, is that actually when you are thinking about your CV profile and so on, and your competence profile, that you start your thinking from the user or the customer, so the other side. The customer ultimately is the one paying you a salary. This is, if you're an employee, it's a company. If it's a freelancer, if you're a freelancer, it's your client. So the customer is ultimately the one paying the salary, but they're also users, so to speak, of your CV and profile. And this may be the human resource people, and perhaps even also the hiring manager or recruiters that you're working with or not working with, that are basically mediating between you and a company. And also, very importantly, your network of friends and colleagues. And if you think about it for a moment, what they would like to have from you, so that they can work with you, is they need, so to speak, specificity. They need to understand what precisely you are, and you perhaps also know this. So we just had Google for a moment, right? So if you're building a website or you have a product or something, and you want to be found in the Google search results, and then you can enter the realm of search engine optimization and so on, then you need these famous product one-liners, and then you need these product three-liners. So you need something that encapsulates what you have or what you do, and that needs to be really, really short, because if somebody is searching for this on Google with some query, and you make it onto the first or to the second page, then actually they look at the title, and they perhaps the one or the three lines depending, and make a decision on whether to click the link or not, right? So to some extent, of course, if you're sending your CV or you're showing somebody your profile, there's a similar kind of situation where something needs to work at first glance. And these are these kinds of people, and taking your network of friends and colleagues again. So if you are in role or job search mode, and you have friends or colleagues that are in the field or that are in companies that you would like to work for, and you're asking them perhaps for feedback, but also to help you, then if you can present them a LinkedIn profile or a CV or something that immediately encapsulates who you are and what you're looking for, then it's really easy for friends or colleagues to kind of say, okay, I know somebody, or I don't know somebody, or I can pass this on, or to give it to their HR and say, look, I think this really matches what we're looking for, and these kinds of things. So the first point here is to invite you to think from that perspective. And then the second point is to say, we said upgrading your competence profile. And this is also new for me. I mentioned that I've been doing this kind of data career coaching a bit, and I've thought about some parts of this. And there's a way, of course, in which when we're talking about these data roles, your technical skills matter very much. And one of the things that I've been saying a lot in career coaching is that if you think about your CV, and at the end of the day, it's kind of like a PDF, and you send it to somebody and they open it and they look at their screen, so they see the PDF, then on that top half page that they see, your technical skills need to be there, and they need to be stand out, and they need to be really clear. They need to be your profile. However, that's just the technical skills. And if we're talking first role, but particularly also if we're talking second or third role, then it's more than your technical skills, actually, I think, that matter in a way, and which is why I've now kind of, we're moving in the realm of competence as something that's a bit more encompassing than just your technical skills. And that's why you have your upgrading technical skills, improving impact potential, and aligning on mission and culture. So the technical skills we're going to look at in a minute, again, with the 3 examples, the engineer, the analyst, and the data scientist. Then I'm going to go, and this will be Dânia's part, and I'm going to go and look at then for you at improving impact potential. This revolves around that some of the points we mentioned earlier. So, you know, if it isn't just experimental, and if it isn't just about proof of concepts, but if machine learning models are being deployed and they're meant to impact user traction or the bottom line or so on, then of course it is important for people that work with you, whether you have this, so to speak, on your radar, whether you understand it, but also what you might be able to contribute to that to make it more successful. So we're going to look at that in a second. And then in a third step, I'm going to go back to this thing that we just mentioned, i.e. the idea that if you have a profile or a CV, you know, can you give somebody a 3-liner that encapsulates who you are and what you're looking for, yeah? So as to make the search more targeted, more focused, if you so like. Okay, so we have these 3 areas that we want to look at here in terms of your competence profile. Into the upgrading the technical skills. So this is about your expertise and becoming a more recognized expert, that delivering the deployment or being part of delivering the deployment and handling the interfaces in these processes that Dânia just spoke about. So if you think back to the cooking, this is what is meant here. And then Dânia, or perhaps you take it from this slide, and then we move as the first one into engineering, if you like.
Okay. Yes. In any case, what I wanted to add here, after what you said about delivering deployment or being part of it, I think that even if you are not responsible for it, let's say if you're the data scientist but not the machine learning engineer, the more understanding you have on what the machine learning engineer has to do, the better it will work for both. Or the better the team works, the more understanding you have. So even if it's not your focus or not what the jobs that you're going to be applying for, most definitely should be, there should be someone with that role in the team that you're applying for. And the more you understand, the better you're going to be at working together. Okay, so we can move, yeah, please, to the next slide.
There you go.
As for the data engineer, so these skills or technical skills that I listed here are SQL, Bash, and programming languages like Java, Scala, or Python. Not all of them, but at least one of them. Yeah. Also, the Hadoop stack or big data stack, like Hive, Pig, and Spark. And the classical databases, for example, Microsoft SQL or Postgres, and even the NoSQL databases like MongoDB, among others. Just some examples there. And as for the platforms, we have here the cloud platforms like AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure, but also any specific Linux distributions or Linux in general. And the tools are Git, Docker, Airflow, and Jenkins. Most of them to work on the data pipeline. And anything related to specific skills or language specific skills is important to mention here. So you can say something specific to Java or something specific to Spark. And specifically for ETL and databases, this becomes more relevant if it's about a data engineer application. And if you have any certifications from AWS, Google, or Cloudera, they might be relevant also. So to show that you know how to work in the platform. And the key topics to include here. So this could be topics that you studied. So maybe some online course or on a bootcamp or by yourself. Or if you have some project that you worked on, to include the topics of data pipelines, algorithms and data structures, and understanding of system design. This is all relevant for the data engineer role. So if you have any questions, just please let us know. Otherwise, we move forward.
I will give you the next slide, and then thank you, Dânia, and invite you actually. So the chat is still open. So as we go through, if on the engineer, the analyst, and the data scientist, you have questions, please post.
You can also use the raise hand. So I stop and we can talk.
Okay, good. So the next one is data analyst.
Yes, for the data analyst, I put here again SQL and Excel and other visualization tools like Tableau. And if you are programming in Python or R, some packages for visualization are very useful, like Matplotlib, Seaborn, ggplot2. And the key topics are statistical knowledge, data analysis, interpretation, and the logical approach. So in the end, you have to be able to tell a story. So you do some data mining and you have to tell a story that relates to business. And finally, the next one, the data scientist.
One moment, sorry. There you go.
So again, I put there SQL and Bash, and then we have the two more popular programming languages for data science, which are R and Python. And there I have a list, just an example again of the packages. I think it's very important that you also write which are the packages that you have been working with, just to show that it's not like a general, let's say, Python knowledge, but it's experience or knowledge working with this kind of package, which can be very specific and can differ a lot. For example, if you're working with Keras. And then the big data or the Hadoop stack, which is Hive, Pig, and Spark. Again, databases, SQL, NoSQL, every database that you have had access to. And the tools are Git, again, for collaborative work, Jupyter Notebook, Docker, and all the models and algorithms that you have studied or have worked with besides the statistical knowledge, so statistical models and distribution. And here I also put some broad fields like natural language processing or computer vision. But of course, if you have some specific knowledge inside this broad field, you should also mention there. And again, this could be a list of skills on your CV, but very relevant if you had experience with those in a job or in a side project, or even if it's a final project of a bootcamp, just to show that it's not something that is only on paper, but you have hands-on experience with it somehow. It doesn't need to be only a job experience.
Okay, we have some questions or comments on coming in. So you have Jupyter Notebook. What about RStudio?
Yes, that also works.
That also works,
Jupyter
okay.
Notebook, you can work with different languages. So R, Python, Scala, Spark, Julia, I think also. But for R specific, you have RStudio, and you have other tools for Python only, for example, PyCharm or other kind of tools that you can use for programming with VS Code. And they're all relevant. So here I just wanted to give kind of an overview or some examples of what you can write there, but it's not limited to those, of course. Yes, RStudio is the best for R, I agree.
Okay. Is it a problem if I've mostly worked with MATLAB?
No, it's not a problem. I think you can also list MATLAB as one of the languages or one of your skills.
Yes. Well, so this Bruno, you're asking, yeah. So I mentioned earlier, I run this 10,000 data scientists for Europe campaign also, and a quip I do have there is that I say that MATLAB doesn't get you hired. R or Python will, but MATLAB doesn't. So the way I'd like to think about it, or the way I've seen it, is that, you know, you're right. So industry understands that MATLAB is easily transferable. However, in the current market, the startups in the industry will expect you to do the transfer. So they will not hire you on the basis of MATLAB. Typically they won't, and then say, well, in your first 6 months, you have now time to learn Python or so. They expect you to have done that before. So that's how I would approach it. I think MATLAB is a good prep. And then if you do not yet have R or Python, then take Python is the recommendation, would be my recommendation. And you need to invest hours in it so that you can show that you have done X number of years in MATLAB, but you now are also fluent in Python. If that's not the case, I'm thinking that a job in the machine learning realm of things is unlikely. These days, it's unlikely. But this does not mean that you couldn't get a job in the business intelligence, data analytics kind of realm, which is not machine learning, but which revolves around nevertheless working with data and visualizing and reporting on it and drawing intelligence from it so that somebody can make an informed decision.
Yes, and I do believe that the thing with MATLAB is the linear algebra understanding. So if you want to work with machine learning as a data scientist focused on machine learning solutions, I think it's very relevant. At least when I studied applied math, we used MATLAB in the university for our project when we were learning linear algebra. And I think this kind of understanding that comes with the programming part of MATLAB is very relevant. So even if I do some course in Python, like you suggested, Chris, I would still keep MATLAB in the list, at least for the first job application or first position.
Spark ML, is it still commonly used?
Yes, so this Spark ML is one of the libraries of Spark, and the same as with R and Python, if you have knowledge or have experience with this library, you should also mention them. Yeah, Spark is more of a framework for data pipeline, also data collection and processing, so streaming. But if you are focused on the machine learning part of Spark, then it's definitely worth mentioning it.
Okay, thank you. Bruno has a follow-up. So he says he's taught himself the Python, and then how do you show you are fluent in Python? So one is, so, you know, if we're talking profiles and we're talking CVs or your LinkedIn profile, there are different ways of showing it. So one is you can simply say I have 3 years of MATLAB and 1 year of Python, if it's something like this, and that then makes it clear. Although I would actually list Python first, 1 year, and then and then actually, if you want to work in machine learning, we already had that, you will need some SQL. That's easy to learn, however, if you've not done that yet. Yeah, it's a few weeks. Yes, and then Meira suggests having a GitHub. So the next thing is, of course, prove it. So if you can show something that you've done in Python, then yes, please don't use the Titanic symbol.
Yes, I think it's valid to show some code. Yes. And most likely also the company will ask you.
Yes.
During the interview process, you know, to do some programming task where you have to prove that you are fluent in Python. That
you're fluent in Python, exactly. And then we're not looking at CV examples tonight, but I mentioned this career coaching. We've worked on CVs, and then there particularly with the PhDs, a lot actually do their CV in LaTeX. And then in LaTeX, you can do visual elements. And we discovered that you could use sort of like a dot system to kind of grade your competence. Yeah. So 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 or 3 out of 4, or, you know, sort of kind of like show how good you are at something. And then the thing here is, I think what one wants to express in the CV is that one has certain kinds of confidence in what one is doing. And then there are different ways to look at it. So ultimately, of course, a GitHub project is great. And then beyond the GitHub project, because somebody actually needs to click on that and go and look at it, you want to find a way on your LinkedIn profile or on your CV to talk about it. And then saying 3 years or 1 year is good, but it's perhaps not as good as for example, listing your programming languages and then kind of indicating your confidence in them. And by indicating your confidence in them, I mean that you feel you're fluent and you're willing to be tested on it, not whether somebody would give you a Nobel Prize for it or whether Google would hire you as a machine learning engineer. That's not the question there. It's just how confident you feel about it. And then such a visual dot system where you give yourself 2 out of 3 for Python and 3 out of 3 for MATLAB and 3 out of 3 for SQL or whatever is a quick visual guide for the other side. So the hiring manager or HR or your friend or whatever to kind of understand, okay, feels confident about Python, not super confident, but confident, for example. Yeah. And you can use such ways of making this clear on your CV, and I think also on your LinkedIn profile in a way to effect, because they indicate quickly to the other side that you're willing to be tested on it, and you think you're ready, so to speak, in the sense of getting a job or being production ready or being ready to contribute to a team. And this actually is important because, as we all know, and also why we're meeting today is, of course, it's a new field, but of course there's a lot of enthusiasm and there's also a lot of talent and there's a lot of people moving into the field. But then we haven't explicitly talked about this, but just knocking off Coursera courses or following YouTube videos doesn't get you hired. You need to express that you can do it. And one, we spoke about this at the GitHub, but two, on your profiles, you somehow need to make this clear, right? And then you should be as confident as possible, up to the point where you know, you can push it to the point, but it shouldn't fall on your feet if you get tested.
Yes, and also this is a really important thing. So even like I wouldn't write there something that I had just read about, or that, I don't know, I took 1 hour lesson on YouTube about, because of this kind of confidence level. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, like, data science is such a big field, and there are so many different packages or so many different approaches, algorithms, and so on, that it's not feasible for one person to understand all of them. So I would really mention the ones that, one, I'm confident in to be tested, or I can show that I have some experience through GitHub projects and I'm willing to talk about them. And two, something that I want to work with.
Yes.
I think those are the two important things to keep in mind when choosing what to write. And Bruno, for what you wrote, like the saying that you are confident in Python, yes, Python is huge and you can do many different things in Python. And in that sense, I think it's important to mention the main libraries that you are confident with, or that you can estimate at least, if you know.
Yes, and in this sense, for example, also precisely on the slide that we're looking at, Dânia, you've done this, right? And yeah. and for these days, probably even for a human resource manager, I mean, you know, somebody might write numpy, pandas, matplotlib, and then stop. And then this is really fairly clear for the other side that you haven't got scikit-learn. That's how they would interpret it. And then this is a sort of a skill set in Python that goes more towards data analysis, but not that much towards machine learning. Yeah,
yeah, the same. Yeah. So you can have Python for data scientists that would have scikit-learn, for example, and yeah. Python for data engineer that wouldn't have scikit-learn. Yeah, that also works. Yeah.
Yeah. So that precisely the specific packages or libraries then make the difference, and this is also why we're listing them here. You actually need them. You need to make it clear. Just saying I can do Python doesn't help anybody. Okay, I'm going to take Lindsay's question perhaps, and then Maximilian also has one. And then in the interest of time, we need to move on a little bit. So. Last one is it better or R or Python to start? Says Mariella. Well, Python these days. You agree, Dânia?
I agree that it depends on what you want to do, but yeah, Python is more generic, or Python would give you an overview of what you can do, since it's easier to do data collection and deployment also with Python. So it would connect better in an end-to-end solution.
Yeah, and it just gives you more employers to choose from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, for time series, R is a leader. Yeah, so that's why I said it depends on what you want to do. If you want to do deep learning, maybe you want to start with Python also. But if you want to do time series, then R is a very powerful tool.
Okay. Question was about the data science as a first role. How about a two-step move? This is a question from Lindsay. So yes, in career coaching that I've done, and particularly in working with PhDs, this is something I typically recommend. So, and I'll tell it from that to make it clear. So something that I've noticed in the past years is that many PhD students handle data all the time, and they increasingly do this actually in R or Python, not in MATLAB. Some still do in MATLAB, but because Python is free and MATLAB costs, universities are even phasing out MATLAB. So the basic skill set is there. However, for example, they haven't done any scikit-learn, and they haven't really done machine learning models of any sort, perhaps except in a Coursera course. And then something that I'm keen on stressing is what you can do there is you can look at your skill set and think that, yes, I would like to be a data scientist, but probably at that point, your CV will not get you interviews at all, or you don't really know. And then you could ask yourself, okay, so now do I spend 6 months knocking down every Coursera course that I can find, or do I go to a boot camp, or do I do, yes, you can. But on the other hand, if you're on the job market or you've already been in education a long time and you really want to move, then something I like to stress is the market for data analytics and business intelligence. So this market for where you handle data, but it's about reporting rather than about machine learning. This market exists, and actually in Germany and most European countries, it's by far bigger than the data science market, because this is established and most companies now have analytics, but not very few actually have machine learning, and particularly not end-to-end. That's a tiny minority actually. So the market is simply bigger. But those that are doing analytics will probably have ambitions to move towards more machine learning. And then if you're in the company already, you can simply step up and move across. So precisely this two-step is possible. And if your company doesn't offer it, you could still do it at a later stage. And then on top of it, Dânia, you will probably agree, we've seen an increasing number of bootcamp participants, for example, that were sponsored by their companies to precisely learn the machine learning parts. So yes, by all means, you know, instead of spending your own time and spending your own money and doing yet another cycle just to get to data science, if you're not there yet, please take the other exit and go to some intelligence or analytics role first, and then, you know, a second shot later. And then this chimes in with Maximilian's from a comprehensive online course. So as you all know, LinkedIn, I don't know about Xing in the German context, I haven't checked, but there are on, you know, you can list your certificates, you can list things that you've done. Then there's your GitHub or GitLab where you can put stuff. So you can do all of these things. The other truth is that human resources, for example, often won't really know how to validate this. They won't be entirely sure. So one would have to see, you know, the certificate as such doesn't necessarily get you the interview or the job, but if you can show what you've done with it. Yeah,
I think it's important to show or to list as long as you are confident in being tested on it, as you said.
Yeah.
So maybe you can point to a project, or I don't know, if they give you a programming task, you can solve it. I think that's good enough. Doesn't need to have a certificate for sure.
Something like this. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for all the input. There's one last one from Silva that I just want to mention, the difference between data scientists and data analysis. Yes, the skill is useful for both, and there is a lot of overlapping. I think the main difference is what is the responsibility of the data analyst and the responsibility of the data scientist when you have those two roles. Sometimes they can also be merged into only one person.
Yeah, so this is from Silva in particular, also yet again on difference between data scientist and data analyst. So actually it's not that easy. I've sometimes used an easy trick to make this clear, and maybe tonight I'm thereby increasing the confusion, not sure. So the easy trick, just to iterate, that I often use is to say, on the labor market at the moment, think of it like this. If somebody says data analyst, they typically want somebody to handle lots of data and do something with it in the sense of reporting, visualization, extracting useful insight, and then handing it over to a human being that makes some decision. And if we're talking data science, it's again handling lots of data and doing something with it. But at the end of the day, it's a pipeline that goes into a machine learning model, and actually a machine makes the decision, as in the recommender system. But there is,
there is some sort of prediction involved, I think.
Prediction involved, but as you made clear, that in end-to-end machine learning, there's also a role for a data analyst. Yeah, in precisely perhaps even being sort of like a bridge between the business side and the data and the machine learning side of things. So there are different ways to think about the role data analyst, and then I think we all have to live with the fact that at the moment this is fluid and you can't really nail the definitions even if you would like to. And precisely because even if you privately, if we now all together thought we'd nailed the definition, it's kind of meaningless, because on the job market out there and with the companies, they wouldn't follow us. Yeah? So you have to live with the fact that there are many different interpretations.
Yes, but I think also what is important to understand is that I think they're interchangeable in a way that maybe as a data scientist, you do more of the predictive analytics, but you also do the descriptive analytics. And for the data analyst, it's the opposite. to do more of the descriptive one and maybe also do some of the predictive analytics.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to take this opportunity. So thank you also for the comments here from Maximilian, Mariella, Bruno, and so on. And Dânia, thank you for answering as well. Take the opportunity, however, to move us on. So we've talked about technical skills, and now I want to draw your attention, but this is particularly relevant for people with the second role, but may surface also increasingly in interviews around the first role, that they want you not just to be technically competent, but also understand in the business context what you're doing and why you're doing it. So I'm going to use three concepts from the startup business world to kind of think about this, and I've called it your impact potential. So it's your impact potential. I mean, it's your ability to contribute. And I've chosen here user attraction, product quality, and bottom line. And what I mean by this is, so if you're building a machine learning model and you want to deploy it, you want actually people to use it, right? You want it to have users. And then the question is, are you building it in such a way that the users will accept it and use it? So is this contributing to user traction? And I think this is an increasingly interesting question, also because over the past year, in talking to people, I've had conversations indicating that companies are moving, so to speak, from this proof of concept notion to trying to deploy it, only then to find that, oh, now we've deployed it and nobody's using it. And why is that? What did we do so that nobody's actually using this? And this, of course, is a problem. Yeah, it can become a problem. So have you thought about this? Can you contribute to this? Are you aware of this? The same with product quality. I mean, this is also a fairly obvious one, right? So you know, perhaps from using different products, that some have quality and some don't. Sometimes it's subjective, but sometimes it's also not that subjective. And then there's product testing and comparison and so on. So it matters. And can you contribute to the quality of it? And then the third point here is revolves around the bottom line. So what's the expected economic impact? And I'm reminded here actually of somebody I know who works for a large pharma firm, and he was already a very accomplished data scientist and working for a pharmaceutical company and contributing and doing interesting stuff and so on and so on. But at a certain point, he thought, what is it that I have to do to get more recognition around here to accelerate my career? And then it took him a while. He looked around. It took him a while to look at certain kinds of things. And then he realized that inside his company, nobody had yet systematically looked at machine learning and the drug pipeline. So in pharmaceutical, the drug pipeline is this idea, and we all know this now because of Corona actually, is this idea where you have a disease, you have some initial ideas, then you do some testing, you think you have a solution, then you don't, then you do more testing, then you need actually to go to some authority that then certifies it, and you need to do clinical tests and clinical trials, so this is the pipeline until you're finally able to sell the thing and in a safe kind of way so that it actually helps people, and it's proven it helps. Okay, drug pipeline. And he figured out that there was scope for this, and that if he did this and he got himself some data together on how expensive the drug pipeline is for a pharmaceutical company, and found out that it's hugely expensive, and then found out that if he was only to improve little things in it and accelerate by, say, a month or whatever, the cumulative savings would be in the millions. And then he took his machine learning skills and started focusing on trying to optimize the drug pipeline. And he discovered that, in his company, suddenly he got a lot of recognition. People were wanting to talk to him because he focused on a problem that was a big problem and had a clear impact on the bottom line. Yeah. So I've included this slide here to encourage you to start thinking about this, what you do and how you look at things, to pay attention to my suggestion, user traction, product quality, and bottom line, as something to take with you, particularly when you're going then for a second and third role. And to also ask yourself, so to speak, when you are looking at your online profiles or your CV, can you, so you're in a job and obviously you're part of a team, and then you've deployed something, and then it does have some effects, hopefully, and some impact. And when you then rewrite your competence profile, CV or online, please do not forget to mention precisely that impact. So don't just talk about the libraries and the packages that you use, but also say what was the overall outcome, yeah, in terms of increased number of users or increased revenue or savings or whatever it is, because that, I think, going forward for your career really matters a lot. And then here's a sort of a second slide at the moment. So this is early days for this, what we're doing here. And I hope in future iterations, we will actually have examples from online profiles or CVs. And I thought for a moment about including some here, but then I decided not to, because in the first instance now that I just want to focus on some of the concepts. And then hopefully, actually, I'm hoping to see some of you again and to actually work with you on these issues. So here are 10 key concepts that I can come up with that should then somehow turn up in your CV or your online profiles. Yeah, and you can see there's one product from product management to leadership skills. It sort of revolves around handling business issues. And then on the other side, it revolves around handling people issues. And the other side is more focused on product or business stuff, or also as an example, analytical skills. And the notion I have here is that you should be paying attention to what you're doing and asking yourself in what you're doing, how this relates to these key concepts and how you can show that you have specific examples where you contributed to something, that you know how to handle project management or you know how to handle communication. Because, for example, if you want to go from being a data scientist to being a technical lead or to being a data science team lead or so, then this is what you need. Yeah, the project management, the communication, the networking skills, and so on and so on. So, or if you want to go from being in a technical role to also having a product role or leading, for example, on product development and machine learning, then product roles, things around UX and UI are also important. It's not that I'm suggesting that you need to yet do more education or take more courses or do whatever. I'm suggesting that in what you do, you need to pay attention to what skills you're collecting and what evidence you have to show that you're good at them. This is what I'm getting at. Okay, I can see at the moment I do not yet have questions for that. So I will continue on to the next section, but if you have, please let me know. Sorry, I just need to move. This is double. I apologize. Slide should go out. Okay, so the last part. So at the beginning of this section, we said we're going to look at, for you, so to speak, at technical skills, and we've done that. I've now looked at the wider, so to speak, competence profiles in terms of business, product, and people skills, if you so like. And this goes way back to the very first slide that we showed you with this quote from Jean-François Garnier. So I think he was clear, and also from my observation, this is quite right. So if you want to move, from being a practitioner to being senior and expert and so on, your technical skills, of course, matter. They need to be up to date and get better and so on. But the other side, what he called soft skills, equally matters. And this is what I've been trying to get at, that you pay attention to what you have and show evidence of this, yeah, because it's important. And then a final point on this for me is, we'll come back to this at a moment. I think also we simply need more data people to be able to do this so that they can move on from technical lead into important roles in companies. And I have a German example for you, actually a German example that we all know. So German car companies, whether they're called Audi, Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler, or Opel, or what have you. One of the things that these companies are really well known for over the past 50 years is that they have been led by engineers. Yeah, so the CEO typically, or those that are considered great CEOs, they weren't MBAs, they were automotive engineers. And I'm trying to say something similar here. I'm saying if we want really great data companies, you can't let the MBAs run them. The data people will have to run them at the end of the day. Okay, so enough evangelizing on that. More pragmatic help for you. So I'm thinking at the moment, I'm thinking that what your employer wants to see or your client wants to see is these technical skills and then also these business competences. And then if you are actually actively looking for something and the majority today is looking for a first role, or perhaps your second role or second job, then to kind of find the right opportunity, I think you need to achieve clarity on your mission and journey. And I'm going to explain that by having you look at 3 examples. Here you go. So this is something I call the mission statement. Actually, I noticed that some of the participants I've met before in this Science to Data Science workshop, so you know about this, but here are 3 examples. So these are, I mentioned, you know, you Google SEO when you have your 1-liner or 3-liners. These are the 3-liners. These are a search or mission statement that sort of says who I am and what my focus is and what it is that I want to do. So the one in the middle actually is my favorite because it's so super clear. And Dânia, you actually know who this is. I'm bringing machine learning skills to the energy industry to help decarbonize the supply of heat and electricity. It couldn't be clearer, right? So somebody has machine learning skills, he wants to work in the energy industry, and it's got to help decarbonize the supply of heat and electricity. So if you're talking gas, oil, or coal, it's kind of no thank you. If we're talking renewables, or we're talking grid, or we're talking optimization, then yes. And then I have the machine learning skills to kind of help you do that through actually not just by reporting and looking at numbers, but by automating production or processes and improving them. And you could, I don't know, if you were in the field, not that I'm in the field, but from people that I know or have worked with, if you think, for example, about wind energy and also solar energy, then one of the really tricky issues there is that you are not always sure of your supply. So there may be little sun or no wind, yeah, this kind of problem. And on the other side, you have demand, and it gets more tricky. So in the old days, if you have oil or gas or coal and demand surges, you can just kind of open the tap or use more coal, or it's fairly easy to meet demand. However, if your supply is slightly more uncertain, then it's not that easy to make sure that you can always meet the demand. So this is actually where machine learning then comes in, because you need to optimize and create new kinds of algorithms and or tools that help you to match demand and supply and make sure, for example, there are no power outages. So here you go, my favorite example. Another one, the one below, I'm a data scientist with deep domain expertise in economics and statistics. My focus is on e-commerce, okay? And recommender systems. And I think this is also well-rounded and very nice. So somebody says, I have a background in economics and I want to work in e-commerce, and then recommender system, which is about shopping. It kind of goes together, and it will make sense for the other side, and you know, it'll tick. Yeah? And then the top one, I continually invest in improving my production capability through training and new challenges. I've been upskilling to data science based on my experience in large-scale IT and data infrastructure. So here's somebody who's making a strong statement for the fact that they've invested very much in getting where they are, yeah, in continually investing in their capabilities. She chose to focus on her production capability, and then says from which background she came to do that. Okay, and what I want to say here is that if you think about a recruiter, a friend or colleague, even a hiring manager, if they see something like this, a 1 to 3-liner, they can easily connect and understand if you are the person they're looking for. And if you are the person they're looking for, you've just told them, and that really is to your advantage. The one other comment I have to this is, if you're actually at the moment really looking for your first role, then of course this may also include clarifying when and where you want to start. So take the bottom one, I'm a data scientist with deep domain expertise in economics and so on, and I'm interested in recommender systems. And then you could say something, I'm looking for a new challenge from July 2020, and then you could please specify in Berlin, or in Berlin and Germany, or in Berlin or New York, or in Munich and Europe, but tell people where you're willing to be, yeah, because this is also, again, for recruiters, human resources and so on, to understand when your availability is, so when you're ready to start, and whether you're actually willing to move to the city in which they are. It really helps them to understand if they want to talk to you, and precisely if you've indicated that you are available and or willing to move to whatever, then it makes it more likely that they will approach you and invite you for an interview. Okay, I'm done with this. Did we have questions? Not at the moment. Okay. then final point here is this one. So we've spoken a number of things that we would like you to do. We would like you to do in looking at your competence profile and also upgrading it. And particularly we were talking strategy about how to do it, how to look at it and how to upgrade it. Okay. And then when you get to the point where you have interviews and job offers, or, well, this is particularly when you have a new job with a new company. So you have job offers, what to look for. And from my point of view, what I would like you to do is I would like you to look at what they're doing and ask them whether they have any info on retention rates, what they do for career advancement, and what they think their potential for scale is in machine learning. And yes, of course, you can please ask about the salary, but why am I saying this, or what's behind this? What's important here? So we started looking at specialization, and part of the specialization also is that teams are bigger. And you need to understand whether the company has a viable data team that's moving forward. And retention rates is something that you can look at through LinkedIn, or perhaps ask them in a nice kind of way how long people typically stay, but it's something important that you need to find out. So is this a vibrant team that is growing and people are staying and this is interesting or not? I think this is important to find out. You also, I think, need to find out these days is whether in-house they have some idea of how data careers work and how they're going to work out, and whether they have any notion about how to advance the careers of data people. So an easy way to compare or to think about this is if you went to work for a consultancy firm, so a large consultancy firm, I don't know, think McKinsey, Accenture, or any that you know. If you were to ask them, they would be able to lay it out. So you start as a consultant, then you become a senior consultant, then a junior manager, senior manager, associate partner, whatever. This is absolutely clear. They would even be able to tell you how long it takes minimally, typically the slowest or whatever. They would be able to tell you what salary ranges exist. They would be able to tell you what you need to do to qualify to get promoted and get promoted again or something like that. They would be able to tell you all of these things in very clear terms. And anyway, if you ask somebody in the company, they would also be able to tell you how to do this. And something I've noticed is that for data careers, this is not that well developed. But I think you need to find out, because it's also part of deciding whether you're going to invest your time in the team and the company, is where this takes you. And associated with this, that's the third point, is simply to find out what is the potential for scale. So I'm not sure if the slide is coming later, but there's some data that revolves around European companies, and then it's not startups, but your corporates that ask, so to speak, are you using machine learning? And then are you using machine learning at any scale? And this is then, are you using it for one function in the company, or are you using it across the company? And the truth is that even if we were to combine one function in the company with across, then from the number of companies that are doing this is very small. Yeah, so, and if they don't have any potential for scale, then what you can achieve there is simply limited. Yeah, so it may still be a valid or interesting job, or maybe the company will get to it later, but I do think you need to know from the start. This is why this is there. Dânia, comments from your side?
No, I think it's very well said. And we do have a question here from Bruno. To ask this kind of questions, do we need to have the foot in the door already, or can we simply ask without sending a CV?
I think you cannot simply ask. So they want. So you cannot ask a company simply directly, but you can ask a company employee. So if you're interested in a company, you could find somebody that works as a data scientist on LinkedIn and ask them. That's a possible way around it. Otherwise, I think indeed, you kind of need a foot in the door or be at the interview. And then I also appreciate, I've just written down some of the key notions here. You would still need to phrase it in a kind of way, because of course these are tough questions. Yeah, what's your retention rate? Yeah, because the other way of asking what's your retention rate is how often do your employees run away and why? Yeah, so you need to find a way of phrasing. So how big is your team? How long, what's the career path? How long do people typically stay? Sort of positive, open-ended kinds of questions to get around this, but I think you do need to do. And I think that if you do it like this, positive and open-ended, actually it will count in your favor because it shows that you are really interested in finding out what the opportunity is.
Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
We have another question from Lindsay this time. Can you give an example of career advancement that would give you the confidence that the company knows what they're doing?
Yes. So, for example, if you get hired as a data scientist, data analyst, or data engineer, right? Then the minimum they should be able to do is to tell you what the difference is between a data engineer and a senior data engineer. They should be able to specify that. And they should also be able to say how long it typically takes to become a senior data engineer. Okay. And then also because we have some PhDs here with us today, and Lindsay, perhaps with your bootcamp, you also have PhDs. So a red flag for me is if a company offers a PhD that has experience with Python and data and so on, a role as a junior data scientist. That for me is a red flag. It's a red flag because it's inadvertently a mismatch. The intentions may be good, but if you have somebody that has years of experience with Python and data, plus a PhD, but perhaps not industry experience, yes, that person for sure is not a senior data scientist, agreed, because the industry experience is lacking. But to make somebody around the age of 30, then a junior data scientist, in line with somebody who's 24 and has just a master's, for me, it's a red flag, and it shows that the company hasn't thought enough about these kinds of things. Yeah. So minimum requirement is they can tell you what a senior is and how to get there.
That's a good one. Simple enough, yeah. Thank you, Chris. We have one last question from Pedro. Can you elaborate a bit more about how the private sector views freshly graduated PhDs or postdocs? Even though we may have good quantitative skills, since we deal with complex data, the mindset of working in academia is different to industry. Also, tools and the way of applying them are different.
Yes.
What do you recommend to adjust or focus on, like new skills, in order to be better viewed by employers?
Yes, and an easier way of thinking about this, or an easy way of thinking about this, is to say, so if you're a PhD and you're applying, and then you're applying to a company and there's human resources and the hiring manager, and imagine them looking at your CV or looking at CVs of PhDs and then kind of chit-chatting over a beer or something like this. And then the conversation may take a turn like, yeah, we have these PhDs applying and they're coming from academia, and have you seen this academic CV? Do we really know that they don't just want to do more research here, but now instead of the university, we're supposed to pay for them? And this goes to the point that the private sector indeed, in this sense, wants to be convinced that you know you're making the transition, that you're ready to make the transition, and that you know what you're getting yourself into, and that you're not just looking for an alternative because your postdoc career didn't work out or something like this. Yeah? And but that said, then it's relatively easy to do. So it's around the competence profile, and part of it is the mission statement and so on and so on. It's relatively easy on a CV or also on LinkedIn to precisely make clear that you know that you're leaving academia, that you know that you're going to industry, that you've thought about what transferable skills you bring from A to B, and here's the examples, and then therefore you put it to rest. And I think this is the job that you have to do. So it's actually about how you present yourself and investing in your self-presentation, rather than thinking that you have to yet do 25 skills course, need a business degree or something else. You don't. But you do need to do the homework of making sure that you go through what you have and show how it's relevant. I hope that helps, Pedro.
Yes, I think no more questions.
Okay, so this is to wrap it up.
Pedro says thanks.
Okay, this is to wrap it up. So what I want to say is you will need to, or what we want to say is you need to keep going to find the right team. Don't despair. And then we're also confident or hopeful that what we've been doing today helps you in that regard.
Yes.
And therefore, we would want to go on to the final section. So what's coming now, give you a glimpse. What's coming now is we're going to fairly rapidly, it's 1944, so we have maximum 15 minutes left. We're going to fairly rapidly go through a set of slides that are intended to help you think about data career issues and also help you in terms of orientation, and are also an opportunity, if you like, to actually talk back to us. So to talk back to Dânia and I in the context of what we've presented earlier. If you're in the AI Guild anyway, you can hit us up. If you're not in the AI Guild, consider joining and then hit us up or find us on LinkedIn. Because there's things we want people in the field to think about more and also to talk about more and therefore we're actually hoping to, I suppose we're hoping to improve the outcome in terms of careers, career advancement, job satisfaction, meaningful products hitting the market, this kind of thing. That's what we're really after. Bruno has a question about the LinkedIn profiles. Should I go to that? I've seen in many LinkedIn profiles that people seem to jump jobs and positions every 6 months. Yeah, exactly. Yes, no, yes. This is a problem. And sooner or later, it's going to be a problem for the people that are doing the job hopping. It always ends up like that, particularly in Europe. And it's also a red flag. So it means if somebody is doing this repeatedly, then there's probably also apologies, a personality issue. So somebody simply does this repeatedly. If it happens repeatedly to the company, it's a problem with the company. But okay. So I wanted to, so we've already spoken. So this is a let's talk overview and a couple of issues I want to hit on. So we've already talked about data career barriers, the advancement, your need to actually ask them, what is the senior role and how do I get there? And then at some point we will in the community need to talk a bit more about how we also get into management roles. And I spoke about that example with the German automotives being led by the engineers. Another issue that we know about is gender bias. A third one is the immigrant glass ceiling. And then, connected to the data career barriers are the mismatch in expectations, which touched upon boring roles and maybe also management failure when companies get stuck in proof of concept and don't advance to deploying. Data career barriers. And this goes to your question, Bruno. So one of the issues really that we've seen is employees rotating among companies in 6 to 18 months. This is bad all around. It's bad for everybody. And it's bad because if you think about it, you need to build something. You need to be around to also see if it has impact. You need to be able to iterate. You need to be able to improve on it. If it goes wrong, you need to be able to start again. And you can't do that in 5 months. It's just not possible. You need 18 months or so to be able to build something, see that it works, improve on it, iterate, and take the impact with you, also as something you take with you. So that's an issue. Practitioners, something else we've noticed is practitioners shifting from employment to freelance and back again. So sometimes freelance is exactly the right thing for people, but sometimes it's actually just a plan B. Leaving practitioners opting to go back to academia is something we've seen, experts going part-time, and little to no progression beyond technical leadership. So there's an issue there that I would like you to be aware of and take with you, and then over time actually help improve the situation. So gender diversity, actually there's a recruiting firm, and I'll mention them tonight, by the name of Hanham, that have put out a data and analytics diversity report this year. So if you type in data diversity report on Google or on your search engine, you should be able to find it. Some of the stuff that they found is that in Europe, the 80-20 gender gap is still prevalent, compounded by 5 to 25% pay gap. It was interesting to see that according to their data, in Germany, the pay gap at the moment is only 4 to 5%. So relatively small. That would be encouraging. Actually, in the AI Guild, I think we're fairly proud that we're not 80-20, but better than that. and we work really hard for it to stay like that. And then something else that is an issue, and you can talk to us more, is what I've called here autochthonous promotion cartels and the notion of international secondments. So autochthonous promotion cartels, to give you a recent example, you may have noticed or not noticed, but you can go and check that SAP, or in German SAP, had a dual leadership. So a German guy and an American lady. Jennifer Morgan and Christian Klein, I think is his name. And they were a dual co-CEOs for 6 months. And then only he remains after 6 months, and she's gone. And the story around it is that Jennifer Morgan actually lives in the United States. She's part of the American SAP and so on and so on. And she has a great track record, but she is not part of the autochthonous promotion cartels around SAP, around their German headquarters. And then there's nice detail in the story about how the CEO that survives, so the surviving CEO, is part of the same football club of which one of the co-founders of SAP is also a member. Yeah? So really autochthonous promotion cartels. This is sometimes an issue. And the other one is international secondments. In the sense that, in particular in the consulting industry at the moment, what one can see is that consultancy firms try to kind of bring in labor from abroad. That's that they then try to have cheaper than the one that is, so to speak, at the location at that moment. So there are some issues around there. We're trying to pay attention to them. If you're interested or concerned, we'd be happy to talk more about this. And then here, a notion of what works or what doesn't work. So some of the things that we've seen that are difficult is if somebody's trying to do AI simply by project funding. The problem here is you initially have a nice pot of money, but the pot of money is limited and you don't know if it gets renewed. So if it's project management, it can run for 3 months or for 3 years, but then typically afterwards, there's nothing, or there's at least potentially nothing. So AI by project funding can be difficult. POCs we've already talked about, and also when companies think they can outsource AI and have some consultants come in or some freelancers come in and set it up, and then there is no continuity around what they've got. So this is also an issue, and it's something that you can also use in your interviews to kind of find out what potential a company has to go at it at scale. Yeah, so you can ask them where they are with their machine learning and their end-to-end solution and how they're funding it. Yeah, and it will be interesting to listen for the answer. Are they funding it, so to speak, in a POC kind of way with project funding, or is it part of a particular business line, and are there certain kinds of expectation in terms of revenue? And this is an entirely valid interview question from you to the other side to kind of say, so you're using machine learning, you're wanting to deploy it end to end, how are you going to fund it, and how will you find out if it's successful? Yeah. And again, the thing here is that if you ask it well and you ask it like this, it works to your advantage, because it says, look, I know this is an issue and I now want to know how are you going to resource it so that we get to the deployment and the user traction. And then I actually already want to know how you're going to measure whether it's successful. And by that, you've told them that you pay attention to these kinds of things. And many of them will be actually grateful because we need more people to pay attention to this. Dânia, do you have any comments on these issues?
I think it's to the point when you say this is the kind of question that it's super appropriate to ask. So it only shows that the candidate is paying attention to all of this. And it also will tell you the understanding on the other side of the machine learning solutions that they want to build or why they are hiring you.
Exactly. And this is, again, particularly also if you're in your second role. So if you have a first role and you already have a job in the field, you can afford to shop around a little bit. Yeah,
yeah, that's true.
Yes, so Meira is saying that what doesn't work is exactly what many companies are currently doing, just to write AI or ML in their product portfolio. Yeah, exactly. Agreed. Okay, so it now comes a bit to kind of help you with your orientation if you're interested. So the first revolves around market orientation. So I've gone through the next 10 slides. I've gone through studies that I think are quite good in the field and have tried to extract from them the most meaningful kind of overview stuff that helps you in terms of career orientation. This is what I'm after here, okay? So in the first one that you're now looking at, we're looking at the market, and you can see here two axes, and the one is about the volume of investment and the other one is about the return on investment. And I simply want to draw your attention to two examples. So there are many opportunities in life science and healthcare, but it's an area where at the moment the data says that there is a lot of investment, but the return is relatively low. Yeah, so this means it's going to be a long journey. Yeah, compare this to technology, media, and entertainment and telecommunications, where the investment is also high, but the returns are higher. So this field is simply going to be moving faster. Yeah, and the also what you will see will happen faster. So it's simply something to be aware of. I'm not thereby wanting to say, please don't go to life sciences, or please don't go to life sciences, or please don't go to consumer products. It's just be aware that if you go to life science and healthcare, this is a longer journey. It's simply going to take longer before the return comes in and you'll be able to see something. And then sometimes, of course, actually this chart does mean, so in Europe, doing machine learning in the government or the public sector at the moment probably is much needed, but unfortunately not very rewarding. It's just how it is. And then as an individual practitioner, there's not much you can do about it. It would be up to the government to change the course. Next one. So key industry challenges. This is based on a PricewaterhouseCoopers report. What they've seen repeatedly is, and I've put it here because it's interesting, because it has nothing to do with the machine learning models at all, or the data scientist. So their three top problems are the uncertainty about data volume, accessibility, and quality, whether they have anything that's good enough to go into a real-time pipeline. The second thing is that actually trust is the worst issue. So nobody trusts it. So you know this, or we know this sometimes in Europe and perhaps in other parts of the world from public discussions around AI. You know, AI will take your job, or whatever fear there is around. So it's a lack of trust of customers, of stakeholders, but also of employees. And this then includes government compliance and reputation. But there's an issue around there that one would need to look at and work on in terms of understanding how to build trust. And if you're in a role where, if you're in a data role, apart from having to account for the data issue itself, it's one of the things that you need to pay attention to also inside your company. So, and this also will influence at the end of the day how impactful your team can be. Think of it this way, yeah. So if you're in a startup or a larger company, and it actually doesn't matter, you're working on something that gets to be deployed, but there will be stakeholders, there will be others that have to play along for this to become a success. And to become a success in the first instance, simply for the product to go live at great quality. And if there are issues around, will this AI work, or shouldn't we just stick to our software deployment model or something like this, then there is work you need to do, and persuasion, you know, people need to be taken on board and persuaded and so on. So please be aware there's an issue there. And then only the third part, so after data volume, data issues and trust, the third one then is so to speak, the competence or skill of employees or companies. It's only the third most important. And I found that rather interesting. Dânia, do you have observations on this in the Berlin startup scene?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I also think that competence and trust go together with one another. So the more people understand, the less they will fear it.
Okay. Okay, so, and then in startup, it's the same data challenge. Actually, often in startups, you don't have, internally, you don't have that many issues around trust, because it's anyway all digital and all data natives. But then for you as somebody who wants to work in a startup, you need to find out what the company funding and the runway is, particularly if it's an early stage startup. So runway means how much money do they have in the bank to keep going at the rate that they're going before they go bust. And if it's a startup that is building something, may have customer revenue, but it's not profitable, then runway really matters. And you need to find out whether it's, you know, 12 months or more. So you have a reasonable stretch of time at which you can go. And then you also need to figure out what the expertise levels and the team size are. I don't know how you see this, Dânia, or perhaps others here on the call see it, but one of the things that I've noticed sometimes with Berlin startups is the data scientist is fresh out of university and it's the only one.
being alone as a data scientist, even if you have some experience, it's very tricky, because if you are supposed to be one person that does the end-to-end solution, it's a lot.
Yeah. So it's something to pay.
A lot of knowledge, a lot of investing hours in learning, and a lot of extra hours working also.
Yeah. Okay, and then one more along these lines in terms of orientation. So this is a market map that I've taken from a company called CB Insights that does data analysis on startups and everything digital. It's here to simply give you an overview in terms of AI, in which categories things are moving, which are the most interesting categories in a global perspective. So the company is based in New York, and of course a lot of data in there is American, but it's also Chinese or European or Israeli. And it just tells you, so to speak, that conversational AI bots, vision, auto, robotics, healthcare, and so on is where a lot is happening. Yeah. So what are the top categories in which AI is being used effectively? Okay. Then another little section, we spoke about your competence profile, and let's turn this around and look at employer competence and skills gap. Yeah, so the other way around. So what's happening, what's on the market, what you need to be prepared for, and if you're looking at industry or startups, sort of as a general sense of orientation. So here's one taken from Deloitte. I need to get this out of the way, apologies. This is about skills, yeah? What kind of skills or what kind of people they need to get things going. And this is among early adopters in the United States. And it's actually interesting that you need a wide array. So this goes much, much further than what we've been discussing today in terms of user experience designers or change management, transformation experts, and so on. So also, if you are at, we looked at technical skills, but if you're in the field and you have wider interests, here you can see that even among the early adopters in the United States, this is super, super relevant. Yeah, growing into other roles or these project management expertise and being able, change management or transformation is taking the whole company on the journey towards AI. So there's a lot of this going on. This is about corporate Europe. That's from McKinsey. What's in short supply? So you can see, yes, technical skills, but the other two columns on the left and the right, skills interfacing with AI, is actually the people that have to work with the technical people, management, marketing, product, production, what have you. And then the management capabilities, so the business as a whole moving in the right direction. So there's a lot going on there. And then, apologies, this is in German, because it's data for a German industry. Same source is Deloitte, I think. Sort of looking at it, and even here more pronounced, where German industry is at the moment, and I'm talking here incumbent companies, not startups. So German industry in the sense of traditional companies. What they need much more than data scientists or AI researchers are actually change management and transformation experts. So helping the whole organization adapt to the data world and then to machine learning. Yeah? So it's a much broader journey that they're gonna be moving on. And this is super interesting for you also if you're going, particularly if you're going to larger companies for interviews. So you could ask, we spoke about, so who's funding it, but you could also ask how it's situated within the company, and do they have a digital transformation office, and who's leading that, and how important is that, and what internal initiatives do they have to do more data and AI. And then another one here, so to speak, what competence should employees, so what competence should employees have from the perspective of the employers? And the lacking at the moment, and this is really interesting, is they don't in the first instance seem to have anybody who understands AI. So what it says here with this Einsatzmöglichkeiten and Grenzen, so what are the possibilities of using it, and what are actually the limits to using it? Yeah, so what's feasible and what isn't? And then which kind of solutions are safe and which ones are transparent? And what's the business model behind this? And you can see here 81, 80, 80. So, I mean, this means you can read this the other way around. So the vast majority, like 4/5, have no idea. Okay, that's the stage where we are. Okay, and then my final part here is in promising AI use cases. So this is, I already showed you earlier this chart with you know, investment and return on investment that gave you an idea about certain kinds of fields. But here's another one. So this is again early adopters in the United States. Source is Deloitte. What are the AI use cases that are most prevalent? And then here the headline is the top 3 AI use cases focus on IT actually, so on information technology. And you see here IT automation, quality control in IT, and cybersecurity. And then come predictive analytics and a few more, customer service, risk management, and so on. And it's interesting in the sense that it shows that, perhaps unsurprisingly, something we all know, yeah. So this is Google, Facebook, or Microsoft having AI use cases that sit atop their IT infrastructure, and then it's the same for other companies in the finance or health sector. So, so this is where it is, and then other things come later: decision support, sales optimization. But they're there, and then also some interesting to my mind is that, so to speak, between number 1 IT automation and number 10 or so. The spread is not that large, yeah. So it goes down from 47 to about 30%, but it's not like 80 to 20% or something like this. So they're all there, and there's a fair number. There's a top 10 or top 12 that are all moving actually to some degree. So there's many to choose from, if you so like. Among AI players in Germany, there's a slide here. You can see that it's similar. Actually, this is the same database, but here filtered for Germany. And you can see the spread is perhaps a bit more contrast in it, but it's also there. And interestingly, it's not all IT. So number 2 is IoT. Okay. And then another thing here is, again, these are these German industry players that still need to make a significant move. So what you see here is that, again, for many of them, it's early stage, and they want to basically do analytics or data analytics for decision-making processes. And actually, this is the realm where it's not yet machine learning, but it's basically about reporting and visualization and doing something to have more data-driven decisions, if you so like. So again, this relatively clear early days kind of thing that we have. Okay, so wrapping up for today. We invite you to keep observing the market, look for matches between your needs and your competence and what the employer's needs and your competences, and then scan the industry and startups for the most promising AI use cases. And so for a final one, over to you, Dânia. Do you have anything to add or further observations?
I think you touched all the main points.
Okay, thank you. So I'm aware that we kind of overran. I'm looking at the clock and I can see it's 8:07 and we wanted to finish a bit earlier. So thank you for staying with us, those of you that actually have. I will iterate that we will send you through Eventbrite actually tomorrow a link to the slides, and that we're happy to engage in further conversation. Dânia, last words from you.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining, and please reach out so we can continue the conversation.
Okay.
And yeah, joining at the AI Guild.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so it's 8:10 now almost. So I wish everybody a happy Monday evening. Enjoy the evening. Thank you for being here. Let us know if you have further questions or help us to understand what we did well. The one thing we didn't do well enough is we didn't finish on time, so we're going to work on that. But thank you again. Enjoy your evening and goodbye.
Yeah, thank you for staying until the end. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.